Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today as part of this amazing conference. I hope you are enjoying on a Saturday morning. You probably notice it from the kids screaming in my background. So thank you so much again for joining us. And here today, we are here today to talk about the role of contracts in essentially overcoming, you should see my slide, by the way, the role of contracts in overcoming hierarchies and how we are, what are we seeing, let's say, in this evolution of organizing according to the experiences from pioneers such as Hire. So, and we of course, we will also share with you some more information around the EMC OS project that is a core part of this session. So first of all, let me just give you some context. Here is Simone from Boundaryless. Boundaryless is the partner with HMI that runs the open source research, RDHY Research Center. And what we do, essentially, we do frameworks and services for large and small companies to adopt innovative business models and innovative organizational models for the 21st century. As part of this mission, we build these frameworks in Credit Commons, with open access that everybody can use. We are famous, let's say, for the platform design toolkit that is the most used, I would say, methodology, complete methodology for the evaluation and design of platform-based business model, marketplaces, and things like that. But also in the last couple of years, we have been working with HMI and Hire very intensively in developing what we call the 3EO or EEO toolkit, that is a framework that we have developed based on, inspired by RDHY. Essentially, you can see that as an open source version of RDHY that we are developing to allow companies to engage with these possibilities, and basically organizational developers, consultants, and everybody that wants to engage with this to try it out and to do their own work and together with us. As part of our collaboration with Hire, we also developed the master classes, and next one is coming up very soon in October. So Emanuele will share with you some links in the chat if you're interested to that. And we are building a community of practice around this topic of entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organizations, as we will see. Then we do research, of course, and you can watch some of the videos that we have made on our YouTube channel, and if you follow our blog, you will also see that we are trying to integrate entrepreneurial organizing with these new growth opportunities that we see, platform design and business model innovation. So lots of work going on in the background. And of course, as part of our work, and we'll talk about this much more later on, we are trying to launch this ecosystem around software. So we want to build software technologies that can empower this transformation, this transition towards these new ways of organizing. So first of all, before we move into the content, I want to introduce the guests for today. I am going to moderate this panel, and with me we have a few people. First of all, Emanuele Guinterelli, Boundaryless 3EO Enterprise Lead. Good morning, Emanuele.
Good morning, happy to be here.
And you will be probably familiar with Emanuele. And then we have with us Rob Solomon. Good morning, Rob. Can you just say hello and say a couple of words about you?
Yeah, hi everybody. Very good early morning at 4 a.m. here in New York City. I am the head of finance at Consensus Mesh, which is a blockchain venture studio and portfolio management company. I'm also the founder of Cone.network, which is a software for 3EO style companies. Before that, I had worked in the holacratic context at the Downtown Project in Zappos.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you so much for just joining us after just a very short sleep after an international travel, a national travel. So thank you so much. Sasha, good morning. Sasha Kellert from Recursive. Can you, Sasha, also introduce yourself and say a couple of more words on the work you're doing?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Sasha. I'm the founder of Recursive. We are a venture capital-backed company based out of Berlin, and we're working on accelerating the transition to the ownership economy. And what we mean by that is we think companies should be primarily owned by all stakeholders, not just employees, but also partners, suppliers, and customers. And we're building solutions that enable that. So the first product is a solution to tokenize equity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sasha. It's great to see how much resonance there is with the work that we are doing and Hire is doing. So looking forward to change some ideas with you. So in terms of today's session, we are on a packed agenda today. So the pace is going to be very, very fast. I'm going to give you a quick introduction on what is happening with contracts and organizations and how things are evolving. Then Emanuele will give you a quick demo on the EMC OS project, showing you some use cases that we are developing. And then we're going to have a discussion with our two panelists. There is also going to be, sorry, I forgot actually, a video from Brian Peters that we're going to show. Brian has recorded the video with us before the event. And Brian is co-founder of Sobol. That is a software solution that is essentially working in the same space, and also collaborator of Consensus as well, and also an expert and contributor to several DAOs. And why these three people here on the chat? Because these three people helped us to shape this EMC OS conversation from the very start. So again, thank you so much, guys, for the great contribution. Then we're going to have a discussion with our panelists, and if there is time, hopefully, yes, we're going to capture some questions from the audience. So please use the Q&A feature if possible. Otherwise, share your questions in the chat, and I will try to pick some for the end. So let me just introduce the conversation, let's say. So what is happening in the organizational space? What is this emerging model we are seeing? Essentially, we are seeing this emerging model based on small units that dynamically cooperate through contracting or dynamically relating with each other with shared services that support these systems to evolve. And why is this organizational model emerging? Essentially because low transaction cost makes it possible, because it's enabled companies to behave, to perform better on the market. So essentially allows companies to manage and to produce both, let's say, scale, standardization when needed, but also diversification and differentiation that are essential to the world of today, where everything is niche and everything is specific. So this is why this is a winning model. And again, the recurring artifacts in these organizations that we see are essentially these small units that use these shared services and engage in this contracting between parties. Most specifically, this contracting element, it's not developed at the same level everywhere. Of course, Hire is much more advanced with the EMCs, but all other forms of inter-unit contracting into companies with different P&L, it's emerging also across other companies. And indeed, essentially, we are moving along this evolution between hierarchies and small units with dynamic contracting, and this is having, of course, impacts in many aspects of an organization, starting from how the purpose is evolving, how direction and strategy are evolving, how work is perceived, and also how leverage in terms of shaping and moving organization forward needs to be enacted. So there are major challenges in how we manage our organization as we move through this transition. And of course, it's a spectrum. So I put some logos here to explain how different companies are moving along the spectrum with different choices. But you can see definitely parallels also in how companies like Amazon or Hire works, or ING or Zappos. So there is a really set of, let's say, elements that make the special approach of each organization. But you can recognize these three pillars, based on units, shared support services, and interaction between units through contracts or direct relationships. And of course, there are also extremes that we are seeing coming up from the market in terms of of the role of contracts. And of course, probably the most interesting experiences we are seeing coming up are related to decentralized autonomous organizations, this new type of organizations that are pushing, forward a lot this idea of contracts, of agreements between units, between parties. And this is an example, the law that is essentially a kind of a venture building, investing firm that is based on very simple, decision-making process that is enacted through I would say, a autonomous system. And when we look into higher, what do we see? Essentially is the most advanced application of organizational contracting in a corporate setting. And it's very interesting because essentially it's very outcome focused, is pushing all the contributors, all the units that participated to these contracts to explicitate their commitment into creating resources, allocating capabilities into creating new scenarios for the market, and includes more the rituals and processes for adaptation, and also includes a reputation mechanism that is very interesting in helping the organization move forward with quality. The mechanisms that characterize hires contracts are essentially fractal. Why we see this fractal nature of the organization? So, for example, to participate in a unit in hire, you have to bid, you have to contract essentially the contribution you can give and the I would say the returns that you get back in terms of ownership, in terms of profits, and in terms of other elements. And this happens at each node. So we are embracing this idea that organizations are also evolving towards some kind of fractalness, where you have several layers of nodes that coalesce around objectives through agreements. So that's the kind of vision of organization that is emerging from higher, but also from the market. And this skin in the game that is pushed across the organization very widely has different I would say nuances, different elements. And of course, there is the element of salary, adaptive salary. There is the element of sharing profits. There is an element of accessing equity and ownership of the new node that is being created. But also there is a matter of having skin in the game in terms of governance. So for example, managing this governance, these organizational commons that are created. And this is also more advanced, for example, in the context of decentralized autonomous organizations at the moment. So we are seeing these contracts emerging, these new ways of contracting. For example, this is an example that from a project we are running with a major financial player in Europe, as we help this company transition towards adopting a trio management style. And we see that every company has its own way to configure and adapt to these systems. So essentially contracts become extremely important. We see that there is an importance to cover the full life cycle of a contract, to invest into contract user experience. And this is why we are working on this software piece, and also why these folks here on the panel today are all working on this topic. And the impacts, and I'm almost done for the intro, but the impacts on management and leadership are huge. So essentially, we see a leadership that now needs to confront with topics such as designing and architecting constraints into this scalable system. We need to develop a management that doesn't just blindly apply these unbundling policies for the organization, but needs to do it in a market-driven way. And of course, looking at the system, the portfolio becomes much more important. Essentially, these new tools are needed because we have to reduce friction. We have to help these processes to flow much better. There are challenges in terms of user experience, challenges in terms of the affordance that technologies bring to the organization. So essentially, what I mean here is embracing these processes without the support of a technology that lends itself to be used in this way is going to be extremely more challenging. So we need these softwares to really be a central, essential part of transitioning towards these new models of organizing. So here enters EMC OS. EMC OS is the project that we're going to talk about now in a demo that we are embarking with IM Model Institute. And essentially, the vision of EMC OS is to enable this ecosystemic contracting, these new ways of organizing, basically specifying a shared model that many organizations are using and many organizations can use to let skin in the game become ubiquitous in organizations, and also essentially to allow organizations to collaborate according to the same language, let's say, or the same tools across their borders. So we don't want organizations to just be constrained in their boundaries, but really think in terms of boundaryless interactions between them. And what are we doing essentially at the moment? At the moment, we are specifying this domain model. We want to have a domain model that is always agreed, always shared across all the players that will decide to join this work. And we have this idea of an alliance, of which I will talk about more later on. And again, we are designing this domain model, this system, according to this idea of a fractalness of organizing. So the idea of nodes that are made of essentially agreements around other nodes that agree on an objective and commit resources and produce a certain collaboration. But Emanuele will tell you more in a moment. This is, of course, not new. So, I mean, it's a piece of work that where players are working since a while now, and these are some of the brands that I've been working on enabling this kind of organizational model. Of course, the most famous probably here is Glassfrog, part of the Holacracy ecosystem. And the architecture I were thinking about, and really I'm done, then I will lend it to Emanuele for the demo. The architecture we are thinking about at the moment is an architecture based on a separation of layer, where we will aim at specifying very well all the interfaces, so that what we can achieve is an architecture that is based on a data and infrastructural model that is really shared and produced by the collaboration of many parties. So imagine a shared infrastructure that runs in a transparent way and in a fully, with high integrity and trusted by all the parties that decide to collaborate. And when I say all the parties, again, I'm referring to many organizations that can interact on each other. At the same time, leaving the designers and third parties to develop, let's say, additions, extensions to these systems, so that companies such as, for example, Recursive or Cone or others can develop vertical integrations to how they see organizations interacting, all based on this shared model of small units, support services, and inter-unit contracting. So, for example, one extension can look into ownership, like Sasha said, or another extension can look into visualizations, or another extension can look into, I don't know, agreements or practices or other elements that can be complementary to the basics, the basic features. So this is, of course, lots of inspirations. We are thinking about these modern platforms that create this, very interacting and large ecosystems of third parties that develop applications such as AppExchange from Salesforce or Shopify, but also inspired by initiatives such as Open Compute that has been transforming computing and data center and computing center design and creation thanks to open standards and alliance-based governance and collaborations. So this is all for my introduction. I will ask Emanuele to just comment on the use cases that he will show you in a minute, and then I will leave it to you, Emanuele, for a quick demo and then the debate.
Thank you so much, and good morning and good afternoon to all our friends. listening to us. So let me just stress one point before getting into the demo. Why are we doing this? We are doing this for 3 reasons. The first one is that we want to make value exchange among the different parts of the organization and different organizations visible. This is happening. We are exchanging value among units, but we cannot see it. We cannot act on it. The second point is that we believe that the same concepts that Hire is exploring can be universally applied with different extents and different ways in the rest of the world. So we want something that is flexible. And of course, the third point is that we want to make all of this scalable. So we want to enable organizations not to have 3 microenterprises, but 3,000 microenterprises that can recombine themselves and collaborate in a very smooth way. So what we are doing with the EMC OS is to think about a number of user needs. So it's a user-centric process of design, from which a number of functionalities are emerging. And we already have a long list. The first list is, how you can create an organization in a fractal way. So how you can take templates and build your unique organization by mixing the ingredients with 2 clicks. And this is something I'm going to show you. It's about how can we create microenterprises, how can we create ecosystem micro-communities, how can we bid this concept that Simone was describing. So ask for services and bid on services, how you can automatically share value among the different parties. So this is something that is emerging. We believe this is the core to enable thousands or tens of thousands of organizations around the world to, to have their own implementation of the ideas that Hire has been pioneering the last 43 years. So let me share my screen. I hope you can see it. It will be a very brief demo. The first step I would like to show you is how you can personalize, how you can design your organization. As Simone was saying, we're thinking about a fractal model. And I hope you can see my screen moving.
Yes.
So basically, we have abstracted a number of properties that all the nodes at the different levels of complexity of the organization may have. One of them is there an owner for this node? Does this node have equity? Has it profit sharing? Has it leading targets? So we have extracted a number of characteristics, and basically we can define an organization that has as many levels as we want. You may have 1 level of EMCs or 3 levels of EMCs without changing anything. It's just 1 click. And you can also change the names of the nodes. So for example, this is an implementation that could look like Hire with members, with microenterprises, with EMCs, and with platform. But you can define as many as you want, and the software will basically reconfigure based on that. This is the first important concept to make it accessible to everybody. A second very important concept is the EMC Creation Journey. And we are going to have a wizard that will help us to create EMCs around the user scenarios, to describe the services that they cover, but also to explain the conditions through which microenterprise are going to join the EMCs. So the EMC will have owners. It will be launched based on a market scenario analysis that the owner or the owners are going to submit. It will need to also create a number of detailed insights about consumer behaviors, market capacity, the scale, group integration capabilities. So this is information that the owner will create. And the EMC, of course, will have a service catalog. So a number of services with a name, a description that can be created. And it will permit order bidding. This is an example of a bid request. I can create a new bid request, let's say for a digital marketing management. I can explain contract duration, a description, performance level, profit sharing. With this order, basically, what we are doing is defining what we expect to have from micro enterprises that are joining. And we can define also the leading goals for the EMC, both at the EMC level and at the ecosystem level for all the parties of the system. We're going to have this huge structure, and this huge structure will then enable others to join. But we also are empowering, of course, individual employees to join the system. So let's say that Jane is a new employee that is looking for work into this space. And given the richness of this ecosystem, we have imagined a way to browse it, to surf it, to visualize the industry platforms that you see here in green. It's just fantastic. But you also have experienced EMCs, you also have solution EMCs, user node MEs, and you can basically explore the system. You can click on a platform and you can see all the EMCs, let's say EMCU within this platform. And you can see also other MEs, Mastery, ASOM ME. Let's say that Jane wants to look at ASOM ME. She will see that ASOM ME, maybe it's part of two EMCs, that there are a number of colleagues already joining. She could see the VAM, the valuation adjustment mechanism, and she can also see the open bids. So the opportunities for joining the EMC. With multiple visualization, she can browse these opportunities to join based on the pay, based on the location, based on the areas of expertise, filtering on them, and then finding the opportunity that is a good fit to her, and then she can apply for it. And this, after a number of workflows for approval from the ME owner, will bring us to a new employee, Jane Stark, joining the ME. This is just a nutshell of what we are doing, but just as a recap, what we are going to do is to enable the ME to exist in the system with all its performance information. The EMC is to be visible in the system with the relationships among MEs, and multiple ways to browse and to let people interact by orders and by bidding through an automatic value sharing. Let me stop here. There is much more to see and to share, but time we have, of course, is limited. This is growing. It's growing through the people also in this room, and we are starting to test it with the market. So we are starting to apply it on real organizations to improve it and also to extend it together. Back to you, Simone.
Thank you so much. We are on time, so there's enough time to have a conversation with our friends here, Sasha and Rob. But before that, I would like to share with you the video from our third virtual panelist, Brian, that couldn't join us today, but we took a minute to record the video. So just let me share it with you. Hello, Brian. It's great to have you, even if offline and as a recording, because I'm sure you're going to bring us some very great ideas for the continuation of our debate at the Open Talk 2021. So first of all, I would like to ask you a little bit to frame for the participants your experience into this world and why you think this idea and concepts around easy technologically powered organizational contracting is important for the challenges that businesses and organizations are living and face today.
Yeah, certainly. So I come from a background of working with software startups and that are rapidly growing and scaling. And those are also operating in extremely dynamic market environments. And so under all this change and trying to embrace agile and scaled agile methodologies, we started to understand that that if you're going to move this quickly and you're going to decentralize decision making within the organization, and give a lot more autonomy to nodes and to teams, to people into teams in the organization, you have to have a solid visualization of the current state of that operational model and how it is changing, and awareness of how it is changing. And the other thing that is required, in addition to being able to see that, and that's what we started to work on at Sobel.io, which is the project I'm involved in, but we also need to have well-trodden pathways to contracting with one another. Otherwise, we are inefficient in this decentralized market of micro venturing and micro joint venturing, and contracting talent in and out of ventures quite rapidly and dynamically in a role marketplace. And if you're going to do all of that, you have to have these well-trodden pathways. And we learned this while we were incubating inside Consensus, which is an Ethereum blockchain startup incubator. And it's global, and it had a large number of people operating across a number of different projects and talent rotating in and out. And what we learned is that when we start to see a good solid pattern of how to do this, and we start to reinforce it with technology like the Ethereum blockchain, by creating patterns of contract on an infrastructure that we can trust, then we have software that is technologically reinforcing these dynamic behaviors, but giving them a trusted, open yet flexible path to do this contracting without much loss or time wasted in that phase, so they can move forward, create the value, form the agreements to share the value, and transact with one another seamlessly. And so I think this is really important in order to unlock this.
And what do you think? What do you think is the value of becoming part of the EMC OS project? So you have been doing this on your own, of course, as a technology developer and as a strategist with your company. So the point is really, why it makes sense to join an ecosystemic effort like the one that we are trying to bring forward with the EMC OS project, and what should we also, as weaver of this ecosystem, as weavers, what do we need to look into? What are the key things that we need to keep in mind to really ensure the success of the EMC OS project?
Yeah, so why I'm very drawn to the project is the project is looking to establish itself using the same principles by which this technology and this infrastructure is trying to support. So by taking an ecosystem approach to incubating the technology together, I believe that this is a very important attribute to creating a successful end solution for these ecosystems. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, one is there's sort of the Conway's law, Conway's corollary that the folks building the technology will start to mirror sort of the architecture of the technology, and vice versa. The technology will start to mirror the organizational design and behaviors of the folks building it. And so that's why, one, I see that's a very important aspect of the approach. The other is that there's already signaling in the EMC OS initiative that it would need to be open. It will need to be modular. It will need to have well-defined interfaces that is encouraging continued adaptation and innovation instead of a closed software solution. The more open it is, the more it's on sort of trusted open infrastructure with those seamless interfaces, the more I believe that will be created that can embrace what these rapidly evolving ecosystems need as far as tooling. And I don't believe you can build that without taking an ecosystem approach to collaboration amongst those building that infrastructure, so they can move together, dynamically contract, and share value, and not get caught up in siloing and competing with one another.
Thank you so much, Brian. We really look forward to having you part of the specification process and the governance, and really appreciate your contribution to the session. So thank you so much, and I'm sure you will enjoy the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just great to be able to be included in this way.
Okay, that was Brian, and I'm also back with video. So I would like to use, to some extent, Brian's points that he raised during the quick intro, his experience, but also I think it's very interesting reflection on doing this in this ecosystemic way. to open also the space for our two other panelists. So I will start with Rob, that also has this connection with Brian, as you work together a lot. And so, Rob, my initial question for you would be why this project is relevant, why it makes sense to have a kind of ecosystemic approach that tries to get everybody in and to create what I call a much broader case for collaboration versus a case for competition. So how we do that?
Yeah, in my experience working in decentralized organizations, or again, I worked with Zappos as they implemented holacracy. As my take on what I would consider the shortcomings of holacracy is that it attempts to be a decentralized org structure, but it doesn't have good systematic decentralized resource allocation and decentralized accountability. And we independently, actually, I came to the conclusion after leaving Zappos that a market-based Brendan High style approach would solve that. And as did Zappos, and they started pursuing their market-based dynamic strategy and building tools for that. We kind of both came to view that really what's happening when you take a market-based approach is you're taking away the monopoly on resource allocation from the executive team or from the hierarchy, and having teams beholden to their stakeholders in the organization, which is good from a alignment standpoint, but also good from there's just limitations on the ability of a hierarchy to scale information flow. So that's why I feel this is so relevant. And the software aspect is just a matter of making the implementation of this more feasible to lighten the burden on folks that are participating in these systems.
Thank you. And Sasha, I want to also ask your point of view, because I think you bring something very important also with recursive, that is, I would say, the connection between what normally happens inside with what happens outside of the traditional border of the organization. So, for example, in the intro, you stress the point that you don't want to just enable ownership to be shared across the employees, but also with the partners that essentially contribute to the business model. And this is a very important point. And in my experience, it's also very central to Hire's culture. And when I work with my colleagues from China, they always think about, how do we run this business model in a way that everybody's motivated to contribute, our users, our third parties in the ecosystem. So I think you can bring to the project that is really need to look beyond the organization, to find ways to motivate and to share agreements also with the people that help us to run these business models, these innovative business models.
Yes, and I think so. Why we're excited about this project is because we look at it from a customer perspective or end user perspective, and for us that means that what Hire has been doing and how that has sort of influenced the design and the ideas behind the EMC OS is in our mind at least highly validated, right? It's been proven, tested, and is probably for that reason makes the project pretty promising. And we see some parallels there in terms of the way companies are changing away from being like siloed large organizations to becoming network organizations is something that obviously is part of the whole idea behind micro enterprises. And what we're working on at Recursive is similar in that way, because we're trying to help companies to break into smaller units of not just teams, but also smaller ownership nodes. And that's probably one of the key reasons why we just started exchanging ideas around the EMC OS early on.
And again, if I can ask you both before moving into other topics, I would like to ask you just a reflection on, what does it take to run this ecosystemic strategy in a way that makes for you, I would say, as a representative of, in the case of Sasha, startup, in the case of Rob, not just one startup, but also his other partners that he's working on. Also, what does it mean to create this strategy in a way that really is significant? So it's not just another drop in the ocean, but it's something that is really creating this powerful case to say, you know, let's agree, because there is a promise of, if we share the domain, if we share the language, there is a promise for us to collaborate across boundaries and really have an impact on how we organize and enabling new elements. So how do we take this project in the right way without making mistakes that can, to some extent, water its potential and really get everybody on board? And of course, not just you, but if you can think of all the players that from the industry that are building solutions in this space or embracing this organizational model. What do you think? Any of you wants to jump in first?
Sure.
Rob.
Yeah. So a couple of different things on the software side and the success there. I think what Brian highlighted for it being modular and being open source is key for the modularity, especially to provide flexibility that organizations might need to suit their needs. Another thing that I think is particularly good about the model you've laid out is the acknowledgement of several different layers. I've seen other projects, maybe they're more engineered towards team-based decision-making, but they try to apply a team lens to the entire organization. And so the acknowledgement and building of tools around, EMCs versus just the individual team level or organization-wide level and having different features for that makes a lot of sense. And then as it relates to just pure implementation of these ideas, the organization just needs to buy in. People, if people have the ability to continue to be fully funded in a traditional annual budget, that is, the typical kind of corporate budgeting process. If they won't be held accountable for the P&L of their team, they won't be rewarded for the P&L for their team, then buy-in is very difficult. But if you can buy in as an organization and have software to lower the difficulty for people to participate in that system and kind of invest in the onboarding, I've seen project or companies where they hold internal conferences like this one. They host workshops. They do training with team leads to get them prepared to operate in these types of systems and help them draft their menu of services and things like that. Those things can go a long way in helping to make sure that the implementation is successful.
So the point that you're raising is probably we don't have to just look into the partners that can build the functionalities, but also on the adopters, that they are probably the major place where this strategy, this ecosystem can really make sense. And so we have to look into onboarding these organizations. So that's a very interesting point. And getting them, I guess, also inside the specification of the domain and the understanding better how these trends are really being embodied by organizations that are looking into this transformation. Sasha, what's your take in terms of, especially I'm interested in your point of view, because of course you are representing a startup and all that, which is basically, if I'm not wrong, in this kind of alpha stage, launching these days with some first customers. So what's your feeling in terms of how can I participate to this without kind of losing my brand and my startup capability to reach the market, as part of a broader system? So I'm really interested in understanding, how do you see that? Do you see that as a channel to bring your value proposition to a broader market, as a way to learn something new and be more, I would say, in line with the trends that are emerging? How do you see that?
So I think it's definitely something where we can learn from the overall project. But what I find most exciting is the opportunity for us to bring that sharing ownership into another project, and to enable other organizations to do so as well, to share ownership with with employees or customers or partners. And the more of that there is in the market, generally, the better for us as well. So there aren't that many projects that are about sharing ownership that have an actual sort of customer focus, where you where you actually make it easy to share ownership with a end user. So I think what we like about this is that if the software gets brought to market, we can actually share ownership with more and more companies and sort of bring, accelerate that transition to universal basic asset ownership generally, right? So we're trying to support anything that that helps anyone, whether it's a small micro enterprise or a creator or a larger company, to share ownership with any stakeholder group, and that's probably the main reason why I want to support this.
Right, that's an important topic, you know, and I feel it's not so discussed yet, you know. So we find a lot of places and spaces where there is this discussion on getting employees on board, but probably there is not enough understanding yet, as at least in the corporate world, let's say, that you really need to look into engaging beyond the borders of the organization. This is something maybe that is much more mature in this emerging crypto space. I would like to say two things. First of all, please share questions in the chat. I see William has shared a couple that I'm going to just touch base in a minute, and then I will leave to Emanuele to add some comments, because I know that you wanted to discuss a little bit about the adoption question and the affordance of technology, with what also Rob was pointing out.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of points I think that it's important to stress. The first one is that in the market, we already have many examples of softwares playing mostly at the team level or even only at the organizational level. What we are trying to do is dramatically different, is implementing a unified market firm theory. So at the end, taking inspiration from the market, bringing ideas into the organization and guaranteeing this contamination between teams, between units, aggregations of units, and the market. So at the end, it's really a porous model and a fractal and a flexible model of the organization. This is, to me, this is totally new. The second point that I wanted to raise is that we are, as Boundaryless, doing lots of consulting, lots of work with real organizations. And many of the ideas that we have demonstrated briefly are coming from them. So we are learning from the market. We are learning from the real users of this software. We are getting ideas. We are validating the ideas. We are iterating with them. And we have already seen lots of interest. So we are already at the point in which many firms have launched micro enterprises or small teams, are looking for ways to empower them to establish agreements, contracts, to track value, to share value. So this is urgent. It's urgent now, and it's growing real quick. So we are seeing thousands of organizations going in this direction. And that's why we decided to also collaborate with Hire, of course, in this. So this is quite unique. It's different from what we have, and it's growing quick, if not exploding. So this is the right time to join this alliance and to give your input, also because you will benefit as an organization adopting the software.
Thank you for your note, Emanuele. A couple of questions coming. Let's use a few minutes, like 5 minutes, to answer some questions coming from the audience. So first of all, William has asked if we have benchmarked the existing smart contracting capabilities in Hire, and yes, I want to say that the practices that Hire is using internally, that are most arguably the most advanced at the moment, we use them as an inspiration for the work they have been doing. But we also understand and recognize the need to work on a user experience that is more targeted maybe to different ways of interacting with software that we recognize are very much culturally also diverse between what happens in China, for example, or in Europe or in the US, of course. So there is work to do, even if we are getting a lot of inspiration from the software that I use internally. And also, I would like to use a question from William to share it with our with our panelists. William asked, what does it need to change in terms of auditing when you look into a company that is made of EMC contracts? But I would extend maybe the question for you in terms of, as we embrace these new ways of creating company agreements, what does it change in terms of not only auditing, but also style of stewarding an organization in a certain direction, or taking care of all the employees and all the elements that normally management looks after in a top-down manner in an existing organization. And maybe, Rob, since you also come from this very bubbling space of DAOs and crypto, and you have this experience with consensus mesh, how was the style in managing and auditing these organizations different, and what needs to change if we go in this direction?
Yeah, I think especially with the software aspect, and then also in the case of DAOs, the open, transparent nature of blockchain aspect, auditing them isn't as difficult. One challenge you have is when teams are interacting directly with each other and not going through the central finance function and making agreements directly one-to-one. You just need to make sure that you're capturing the metadata around those interactions so that there is this, you're not just getting raw transactions or non-transparent interactions that you can't follow up on. But assuming that you are using a software, or in the case of DAOs, committing on-chain transactions, it's quite easy to audit. What tends to be more difficult, especially for public companies who have a need to forecast, is the forecasting aspect of organizations like this. Zappos has built tools into their process, into their software, specifically for forecasting. But that's an area where in a way, companies are very used to forecasting. You think about cities or economic networks that more so resemble the RDHY model. You don't tend to see cities budget and forecast the same way, for not just for the city government, but for all the different actors in that ecosystem the same way, because of its decentralized nature. And so that can be a challenge for some of these types of networks.
Thank you so much, Rob. Sasha, before we move into the last bits, I would like to ask you also a little bit of your experience into embedding these new ways of designing engagement policies and contracts with users, employees, and so on. How much did you find it difficult to rely on the blockchain for smart contracting? Are you looking into that? How's it going in terms of really making these contracts smart beyond the tradition, that was essentially a bottleneck in terms of user experience, into really widespread skin in the game and widespread contracting?
Yeah, so for me, there's always two worlds that I'm working in simultaneously. One is on the technology side, so the crypto, let's call it the crypto space, where there's a lot of excitement about the technologies that are being used in the future of organizing. And then on the other side, you have the second world, which you can, I guess, call like the reality of our customers. And that there's a big gap in terms of what the technology is promising and where customers currently are. So the things that we are probably sort of find most challenging is leveraging the underlying crypto technology, but also making it accessible to the broader public. So if you're sharing ownership with as a food delivery platform with a bike rider, they're not going to have a MetaMask account. They're not going to know what a smart contract is. And that makes things a lot more challenging in terms of designing the user experience. And also I'm thinking about what actual underlying ownership asset you're really sharing. So I think that's sort of the biggest challenge for us, is walking the line between those two worlds.
Right. This, I think, is emerging as a topic. As we see this excitement around, let's really build smart organizations where cost of transaction is brought down, and we create democratic organizations where everybody can really participate, and there is this massive UX user experience gap that we see, for example, in the crypto space that is emerging, and I think this is really where we are looking for in terms of what value we can also add with the EMC OS project. So to look into, and to quote my friend Jacopo Romei, that is one of the best experts in the world around contracts, when he said, he told me, we need to look into the UX of contracts. We need to look into the user experience of this new way of organizing. We need to build these affordances, the new affordances, to use technology as a way to really reach everybody, in a way that is inclusive, and not in a way that, as often we have seen, technology becomes a way to make the difference between those who get it and those who don't. So I think that's a very important point. So there are a couple of more questions in the chat that I would like to just try to address quickly before we close. There's a question on how the VAM contracting works in this software. Again, at the moment, we are scoping this software. So the VAM, value adjustment mechanisms, are part of the creation of the node. So when Emanuele explained how do you create the node, this is where you sign the contract with the other organizational counterparts. And there are ways in the software to configure if the creation of the nodes needs some kind of double check from the inside of the organization, for example, for capital allocation or resource allocation. And then there are other questions on the chat that unfortunately we do not have time to answer now because we have only 3 minutes. So before, first of all, let me share with you the final bits. So the screen, let me share my screen. You see my snow, all right, just a second. Yes. So first of all, I would like to close this panel, this amazing panel, with just a call to action. We are building this alliance. It's gonna be an open collective. You will find in this alliance people like the ones that you had here in the panel today, like Sasha, Rob, Brian, myself, HMI, Emanuele, Boundaryless. We are starting to build this. So it's open, it's an open process. We really look forward to more collaborators, more adopters that want to adopt this software, more organizational development firms, more software development companies that are developing tools in this space that want to possibly become part of the system, so become compatible with this system. We're looking forward to an alliance, to a governance process that is really open and inclusive, like, for example, Open Compute has been doing, and is a great inspiration for us. Coming up in our universe, there are 2 trainings that I want to remind you about. There is a trio masterclass coming up in October, pretty soon. So really, it's great for you to catch up with. There's also a platform design bootcamp coming up in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested in our open source framework at Boundaryless, Credit Commons, always accessible, check this out. I think Emanuele also shared something in the chat. Then download the toolkits, engage with these processes in an open way. These toolkits are free to use, open to commercial users, so don't have any issue. You don't have any issue in using them, and we're looking forward for users' feedback. So participate into this process. And finally, there is our research you can catch up with. We are running a blog, a podcasting series that is coming up in October with this 3rd series. And in the 2nd series, as you can see here, there is an amazing episode we have run with Brian, Rob, and Sasha, really around this work that we are doing that goes much more in deep into some of the concepts we have discussed today. And there is our newsletter you can also catch up with. Please get in touch if you want to become part of the alliance as a contributor, as an investor. We are looking at partners that want to invest with us into this space to develop these solutions and this challenging but exciting ecosystem strategy. Last minute, I want to thank you guys, Sasha and Rob first, and Brian from remote. And let me say a special thank for Rob that is already 4 a.m. in the night, just a couple of hours of sleep after business travel. Sasha, good luck with the launch of Recursive. Keep an eye on that. And Emanuele, thank you for your contribution. And higher thanks for organizing this amazing conference. Follow on, and thanks to Thinkers 50 for co-hosting it. excited to look forward for the future. Thank you so much and talk to you soon.